Peter Griffin, loved. This man has crashed a blimp into his own house, fought a giant chicken across multiple continents, and once held his own fart hostage for ransom money. Peter isn't just stupid, he's weaponized stupidity. He's turned being an idiot into an art form that somehow keeps Quahog from ever having a normal day. What makes Peter work is that he never learns anything, ever. Most sitcom dads have that moment where they realize they messed up and hug it out. Peter will burn down an orphanage, get told he's wrong, agree that he's wrong, then immediately do something worse. The man has the memory of a goldfish and the decision-making skills of a drunk toddler playing with fireworks. He's also weirdly confident for someone who fails at literally everything. Peter will walk into any situation, brain surgery, piloting a plane, starting a religion, with the same energy as someone who's done it 1,000 times. Spoiler, he hasn't. And that confidence is exactly why fans love him, because you never know if he's about to create the funniest moment of the episode or accidentally start World War III. The show lives and dies on Peter's ability to take a simple premise and nuke it from orbit. Need someone to fight a chicken for 10 minutes straight with zero explanation? Peter's your guy. Need someone to create an independent nation in his house? Done. He's less of a character and more of a narrative grenade that the writers pull the pin on whenever things get too normal. But here's the thing. Peter somehow gets away with all of it. Lois keeps taking him back, his friends keep hanging out with him, and Quahog keeps letting him exist without filing a restraining order. He's living proof that if you're entertaining enough, society will just let you coast through life causing problems. That's the American dream right there. Meg Griffin, hated. Now, flipping completely to the other side, Meg Griffin might be the most tragic character in television history. This girl exists solely to be dumped on by everyone she knows. Her own family treats her like a malfunctioned appliance they're stuck with. The show doesn't even pretend there's a reason. Meg's just the designated punching bag and everyone's okay with that. What makes Meg's treatment so dark is that she's actually the most normal person in the family. She's not evil like Stewie, not stupid like Peter, not pretentious like Brian. She's just a regular teenage girl trying to survive high school. And for that crime, the universe has decided she deserves endless suffering. The in-universe hatred makes no sense, which is kind of the point. Meg will walk into a room and people will groan. She'll try to contribute to a conversation and get told to shut up. The show has done episodes trying to explain why everyone hates her, and the answer is always just because it's funny, which is pretty brutal when you think about it. Fans are split on Meg. Some people find the abuse funny because it's so over the top that it becomes absurd. Others feel genuinely bad for her because the show never gives her a win. Every time Meg gets close to happiness, something catastrophically bad happens to reset her back to misery. She's Charlie Brown if the football actively hated him. The worst part is when the show tries to justify it by making Meg secretly terrible or saying the family needs a punching bag to function. Like, cool, thanks for that psychological horror explanation for why bullying a teenager is fine actually. Really great work there. Meg's existence is basically the show asking how far can we push this before it stops being funny, and then sprinting past that line every single episode. She deserves better, but that would require the show to fundamentally change how it works, so here we are. Stewie Griffin, loved. Speaking of characters who cause problems but with way more style, Stewie Griffin is what happens when you give a baby a British accent, a PhD in physics, and absolutely zero parental supervision. This kid has built time machines in his bedroom, created weather control devices, and plotted his mom's death more times than anyone can count. He's essentially a supervillain who still needs help reaching the cookie jar. Early Stewie was pure evil genius energy. He wanted Lois dead, he wanted to take over the world, and he treated everyone like peasants beneath him. The show has since softened him into more of a sarcastic, gay-coded intellectual, but that original murderous energy is what hooked people. There's something inherently hilarious about a 1-year-old explaining quantum mechanics while wearing a diaper. His relationship with Brian is the show's secret weapon. These two have more chemistry than most actual sitcom couples. They've time traveled together, gone on road trips, written novels, and had deeper conversations than anyone else in the Griffin house. Stewie went from wanting to kill his family to having a codependent friendship with the family dog, and somehow that character arc actually works. What keeps Stewie interesting is that he's the smartest person in every room, but still acts like a baby when it counts. He'll explain multiverse theory and then throw a tantrum because his teddy bear Rupert isn't wearing the right outfit. That contrast is comedy gold. He's sophisticated enough to build a teleporter, but immature enough to use it for petty revenge. Fans love Stewie because he gets to say what everyone's thinking, but with 10 times more wit and a British accent that makes it sound classy. He's basically the show's Greek chorus, if the Greek chorus had access to military-grade weapons and serious mommy issues. Hey, by the way, I'm posting pretty consistently here, so it would mean a lot if you could subscribe to the channel and drop a like for the algorithm. Brian Griffin, recent seasons, hated. While we're discussing characters who got worse over time, modern Brian already got roasted, but it's worth mentioning that fans specifically started hating him around the same time he started dating women way younger than him and preaching about politics. Early Brian had opinions, but listened to other people. Modern Brian treats every conversation like he's grading your essay and you failed. The Quagmire rant lives in everyone's head rent-free because it perfectly summarized what fans were already thinking. Quagmire spent 5 minutes listing every reason Brian sucks, and the entire audience was nodding along. When the most perverted character on the show has the moral high ground, you've messed up as a character. Brian's romance plots became particularly painful because the show would set him up with someone, let him be terrible to her, then act shocked when it fell apart. He dated Jillian and treated her like an idiot. He dated Meg's teacher and ruined her career. The pattern was always the same. Brian wants something, gets it, realizes he's too self-absorbed to maintain it, then learns nothing. The worst Brian moments are when he tries to be deep. He'll quote philosophers he definitely hasn't read or bring up political theory that he clearly doesn't understand. The character went from smart guy in a dumb world to dumb guy who thinks he's smart, and that transformation killed any goodwill fans had left. What's frustrating is that the show occasionally remembers old Brian and gives him a good episode, which just reminds everyone of what they lost. It's like your friend getting back together with their terrible ex. You want to be supportive, but mostly you're just disappointed. Glenn Quagmire, loved. And if we're ranking characters by how much chaos they bring per second of screen time, Glenn Quagmire is operating on a different level. This man's entire personality is being horrifyingly perverted, and somehow the show makes it funny. Quagmire has done things that would get anyone else arrested, investigated, and banned from 17 countries. But he delivers it all with such cartoonish energy that it loops back around to comedy. The giggity catchphrase alone has done more cultural damage than most TV characters accomplish in their entire run. Quagmire weaponized a single word into his brand. He's like if a midlife crisis gained sentience, got a pilot's license, and decided to make that everyone else's problem. What makes Quagmire work is that he owns it completely. He's not pretending to be a good person or trying to justify his lifestyle. He's just out here living his truth, and his truth involves logistics that would require a full-time assistant and a very understanding lawyer. The show doesn't try to redeem him or make him sympathetic. He's pure ID with a 70s porn stash. His dynamic with the group is perfect because everyone knows exactly who he is and keeps hanging out with him anyway. Joe and Cleveland will shake their heads at his stories, but still show up for beers. Peter treats him like a normal friend, despite Quagmire admitting to federal crimes every other sentence. It's the kind of friendship that only works in cartoons. The best Quagmire episodes are when he breaks character and shows actual depth. Like when he tears into Brian for being a terrible person, suddenly this perverted cartoon pilot becomes the moral authority, and it's devastating. Quagmire might be a walking lawsuit, but he's weirdly principled about certain things, which makes those moments hit harder. Carter Pewterschmidt, hated, is what happens when you create a character whose only purpose is to make Peter's life worse while being as unlikable as possible. Carter is rich, mean, and treats everyone beneath him like they're background characters in his personal story. He's the father-in-law from hell, except worse, because he actively enjoys the psychological damage. Carter doesn't just dislike Peter, he goes out of his way to humiliate him. He'll fund entire schemes just to watch Peter fail. He'll dangle opportunities in front of Peter, knowing they'll blow up spectacularly. The man has ruined son-in-law's life as a legitimate hobby, and he's dedicated to it. What makes Carter hateable is that he's not funny mean, he's just cruel. When Peter does something stupid and faces consequences, that's comedy. When Carter systematically destroys Peter's self-esteem because he married Lois, that's just unpleasant. The character doesn't have the charm to make his awfulness entertaining. His relationship with Lois is also messed up. He clearly doesn't respect her choices or independence, but the show treats this like normal father-daughter stuff instead of controlling behavior. Carter sees Lois as property that Peter stole, and nobody really calls that out. Fans hate Carter because he represents real-world awfulness in a show that's supposed to be escapist nonsense. Peter fighting a chicken is absurd and funny. Carter reminding Peter that he'll never be good enough for his daughter is just depressing television that nobody asked for. Brian Griffin, early seasons, loved. Since we're talking about the Griffin family's intellectual cornerstone, Brian Griffin used to be the heart of this whole show. Early Brian was the voice of reason in a house full of maniacs. He was cultured, he read books, he tried to make the world better, and he genuinely cared about the people around him. He was the straight man who made everyone else's insanity actually land. Back in the day, Brian episodes hit different. He'd have real conversations about religion, politics, and relationships while everyone else was doing cutaway gags. He dated actual women, had serious career ambitions, and occasionally wrote something that wasn't complete garbage. He was proof that Family Guy could do emotional storytelling when it wanted to. His relationship with Peter grounded the show in a weird way. Brian saw Peter as a friend, despite all evidence suggesting that was a terrible idea. He'd call Peter out on his nonsense, but still show up for the next harebrained scheme. That loyalty made sense because Brian genuinely believed in second chances and seeing the good in people. The best Brian moments came when he failed at being pretentious. He'd try to impress a girl with his screenplay, and she'd tear it apart. He'd give a speech about social justice and immediately contradict himself. Early Brian was self-aware about his flaws, which made him likable even when he messed up. But somewhere along the way, modern Brian became everything fans hate about dinner party philosophers who won't shut up about their podcast. He turned into a walking Twitter argument who thinks every conversation is a TED Talk. The dog who used to have genuine depth became a caricature of liberal smugness that even liberals find exhausting. New Brian is preachy, hypocritical, and treats everyone like they're idiots for not sharing his opinions. He'll lecture Quagmire about morality for 5 minutes, then hit on Meg's friends the next episode. He claims to be a feminist, but treats women like achievements to unlock. Every episode with modern Brian feels like being trapped at brunch with someone who just discovered philosophy and won't stop talking about it. The show knows fans turned on him too. They literally killed him off and brought him back because the backlash was that intense, but instead of fixing the character, they just leaned in to making him worse. Now Brian exists as this weird punching bag who deserves every bad thing that happens to him, which is a depressing arc for someone who used to be the show's conscience. What's wild is that fans still remember old Brian fondly while actively rooting against current Brian. It's like watching your cool older cousin turn into a cryptocurrency bro. The character is still there, but everything that made him great got replaced with the worst traits of every pretentious artist you've ever met. Bonnie Swanson, hated, exists in this weird space where she's barely a character, but what little personality she has is unpleasant. Bonnie spent like 14 seasons pregnant, finally had the baby, and somehow became less interesting after that storyline resolved. Her main trait is being mean to Joe, which would be fine if it was funny or if Joe deserved it, but mostly it's just uncomfortable. Joe is out there being a superhuman cop, keeping Quahog safe, and Bonnie's at home acting like he's the worst husband alive because he can't reach the top shelf. The show doesn't know what to do with Bonnie. She's not funny enough to carry jokes, not developed enough to have real storylines, and not likable enough for fans to care about her. She exists because Joe needs a wife for the group dynamic, but the writers clearly don't enjoy writing for her. What's weird is that Bonnie occasionally gets moments where she could be interesting, like when she reveals she's as messed up as everyone else in Quahog. But then the show immediately forgets about it. She's stuck in this loop of being vaguely dissatisfied with Joe without ever doing anything about it. Fans don't actively hate Bonnie like they hate some characters, they just forget she exists until she shows up to complain about something. She's the human embodiment of, oh yeah, that character. In a show full of memorable personalities, being forgettable might be worse than being hated. Lois Griffin, loved. Holding down the entire Griffin household while Peter speedruns every bad decision possible is Lois Griffin. And honestly, this woman deserves a medal and probably therapy. Lois is what happens when you take a rich girl with actual talent and potential, then trap her in Rhode Island with a man-child, and kids who range from evil genius to walking disaster. She's the show's anchor to reality. When Peter wants to fight the entire US government, Lois is there, explaining why that's insane. When Stewie builds a doomsday device, Lois is the one who has to confiscate it before bedtime. She's playing life on hard mode while everyone else button mashes their way through existence. What makes Lois interesting is that she's not perfect either. She's got that rich girl condescension buried under the housewife routine. Every so often, the show reminds you that Lois could have done anything with her life. She was a model, she plays piano, she speaks multiple languages, but she chose this chaos. That's either incredibly romantic or a sign she needs better life coaches. Her relationship with Peter is the kind of marriage that only works in animation. In real life, Lois would have divorced him 17 seasons ago and taken everything, but there's something genuinely sweet about how she still loves this idiot despite him ruining her life on a weekly basis. She sees something in Peter that literally nobody else does, which is either beautiful or concerning. Fans love Lois because she's competent in a show full of absolute morons. She's the one character who could exist in a normal sitcom and function perfectly fine. Instead, she's stuck managing a family that treats every day like a new opportunity to violate physics and common sense. Vinny, hated. The timeline where a Vinny appears is forever cursed because he represents everything fans feared could happen to the show. Vinny isn't a bad character on his own, he's just not Brian, and that was his entire problem. The show killed off a beloved main character and replaced him with generic Italian stereotype dog, which went about as well as expected. Vinny's personality was, I'm from New Jersey and I have an accent, which is not enough to replace Brian Griffin. The show tried to make him work by giving him the same role as Brian, but it just highlighted how much chemistry and history Brian had with the family that Vinny couldn't replicate in 3 episodes. Fans revolted so hard that the show brought Brian back almost immediately, which made Vinny's entire existence feel pointless. He was a plot device designed to make people appreciate Brian more, which is actually kind of genius, but also made everyone hate Vinny by association. He never had a chance. The worst part is that Vinny probably could have been fine as a side character. If he'd shown up as a neighbor or a friend, people might have liked him. But putting him in Brian's spot guaranteed that fans would compare them constantly, and Vinny lost that fight before it started. Looking back, the Vinny arc was the show testing how far they could push fan loyalty, realized they found the line, and immediately backtracked. Vinny is a cautionary tale about replacement characters and why some creative decisions should stay in the writer's room. Joe Swanson, loved. Speaking of managing impossible situations, Joe Swanson is what you get when you take a 1980s action hero, put him in a wheelchair, and refuse to let that slow him down even a little bit. Joe has the energy of someone who drinks pre-workout for breakfast and considers relaxing a form of weakness. The man is in a wheelchair and still the most physically capable person in Quahog. Every Joe action scene goes absurdly hard for no reason. He'll be having a normal conversation and then suddenly he's rappelling down a building, taking out 12 armed suspects, and defusing a bomb, all before lunch. The show treats his wheelchair as this minor inconvenience that Joe has decided to simply ignore through pure determination and upper body strength. What fans love about Joe is that he's legitimately good at his job. In a show where everyone's a parody or an idiot, Joe is actually a competent cop who takes his work seriously. Sure, he's also unstable and probably has PTSD from 17 different incidents, but when Quahog needs someone to handle business, Joe's the guy. His voice delivery is legendary. Every line sounds like Joe's either about to cry or punch through a wall, sometimes both at once. He brings this manic intensity to everything, whether he's talking about his feelings or explaining proper tactical formation. It's the kind of performance that shouldn't work, but becomes iconic. The tragedy of Joe is that he's this capable, driven person stuck in a neighborhood full of people who constantly waste his time. Peter will call him over for the dumbest possible reasons, and Joe still shows up because that's who he is. He deserves better friends, but he's too loyal to admit it. Connie D'Amico, hated, is the mean girl blueprint with 0 redeeming qualities. She exists to make Meg's life specifically worse, which is impressive given that literally everyone else is already doing that. Connie is the popular girl who peaked in high school and is desperately trying to maintain that power through psychological warfare. Every Connie appearance is the same. She says something cruel to Meg, laughs about it with her friends, and faces 0 consequences. The show doesn't even try to give her depth or explain why she's like this. She's just mean because the show needed a high school antagonist for Meg to suffer under. What makes Connie particularly annoying is that she's not clever or funny with her insults. She's just generically cruel, in that way that every teen movie villain is cruel. There's no creativity, no memorable lines, just basic, you're ugly and unpopular energy that we've seen a million times. The show occasionally tries to humanize her or give her a moment of vulnerability, but it never sticks. By the next episode, she's back to tormenting Meg for no reason. It's lazy, writing disguised as character consistency. Cleveland Brown, loved. And speaking of loyalty, Cleveland Brown is the chillest person to ever exist in animation. Cleveland talks like he's permanently on sedatives, moves like he's underwater, and somehow became one of the most beloved characters by just being relentlessly nice. In a show that runs on chaos and screaming, Cleveland is out here operating at 0.5x speed. His whole vibe is guy who will support whatever you're doing, even if it's obviously a terrible idea. Peter could announce he's starting a nuclear reactor in his garage, and Cleveland would just go, "That's pretty good," in his trademark delivery. He's not dumb, he's just aggressively non-confrontational and very, very chill. The slow delivery is what makes Cleveland perfect. Every line has this deliberate pacing that makes even mundane observations hilarious. He'll describe something insane happening and sound like he's commenting on the weather. That contrast between what's happening and how Cleveland reacts became his entire character, and it works every single time. Fans love Cleveland because he's genuinely kind without being boring. He's not the comic relief or the butt of jokes. He's just a solid dude who happens to exist in a universe of absolute maniacs. When Cleveland moved to his own show and then came back, people were genuinely happy to have him return because he balances out the group perfectly. His friendship with Peter, Joe, and Quagmire is gold specifically because Cleveland never matches their energy. They're all yelling and fighting and causing problems, and Cleveland's just there with a beer, nodding along, occasionally dropping wisdom that everyone ignores. He's the friend group's emotional support character. Diane Simmons, hated. Went from being a regular news anchor to attempting murder in what might be the show's wildest character twist. For seasons, Diane was just there as a background character who occasionally had scenes with Tom Tucker. Then suddenly she's killing people because of a decades-old grudge, and the show expected everyone to just roll with it. The twist itself was shocking, but not in a good way. It felt less like a planned storyline, and more like the writers needed a surprise villain and picked Diane because she was available. Nothing in her previous appearances suggested she was capable of murder, which made the reveal feel random instead of clever. What bothered fans was that the show went dark for this storyline without earning it. Family Guy isn't built for serious murder mysteries. The tonal whiplash of going from cutaway gags to actual murder investigations just didn't work. It's like if SpongeBob suddenly did a serial killer arc, technically possible, but fundamentally wrong. Diane's death was also brutal in a way that felt off for the show. She got shot and fell off a building, which is way more final than how Family Guy usually handles character deaths. The show will bring anyone back for a joke, but Diane stayed dead, which made the whole thing feel weird and unfinished. Fans who remember Diane mostly remember being confused about why this happened. She wasn't important enough to make her betrayal impactful, but the show treated it like a massive reveal. It's a storyline that probably seemed better in the writer's room than it played on screen. Herbert loved. Taking the concept of questionable character who somehow works to its absolute limit is Herbert, and look, we all know what this character is. An old man who's weirdly obsessed with Chris Griffin should not be funny. In any other context, this character gets the show canceled, but somehow, through voice acting and commitment to the bit, Herbert became this beloved recurring character. The voice is doing 90% of the heavy lifting here. That wheezy, old-timey delivery turns what should be uncomfortable into something cartoonishly absurd. Herbert sounds like he's from a 1940s radio show that accidentally got spliced into modern television. Every line drips with that old man energy that makes even the creepiest statements loop back to comedy. What saves Herbert is that the show never actually lets anything happen. He's all set up with no payoff, which keeps him in cartoon villain territory instead of anything actually disturbing. He's perpetually chasing Chris, never catching him, like some kind of elderly Wile E. Coyote situation. His best moments are when he's doing something completely unrelated to the main premise. Herbert fighting in Vietnam, Herbert confronting death, Herbert having beef with Jesse. These bits work because they treat him like a full character instead of just one joke. He's got depth, and that depth is somehow even weirder than the surface level stuff. Fans defend Herbert because he's so obviously a cartoon character that the premise becomes absurd rather than creepy. Nobody's confused about what the show is doing. It's the same energy as cartoon violence. We all understand this exists in a space where normal rules don't apply. Muriel Goldman, hated, is so unmemorable that her death was the most interesting thing about her character. Muriel existed as Mort's wife for years, without having a personality, storyline, or reason for fans to care. Then the show killed her off and replaced her with a younger woman, which is somehow the most realistic thing Family Guy has ever done. Nobody mourned Muriel because nobody knew who Muriel was. She'd appear in background shots and maybe say one line per season. The show treated her like set dressing that occasionally moved. When they announced her death, fans' main reaction was, "Wait, who?" The fact that the show killed her off screen tells you everything about how much they valued the character. They didn't even give her a proper death episode, just mentioned it casually and moved on. It's the TV equivalent of updating your LinkedIn with zero fanfare. What's almost impressive is that Muriel managed to be boring in a show that makes everyone a caricature. Even minor characters usually get one defining trait or running joke. Muriel got nothing. She was aggressively bland in a universe of chaos. Her replacement, Rachel, immediately had more personality and better jokes, which just highlighted how little effort went into Muriel. The show basically admitted they kept a nothing character around for years and finally decided to do something about it. Muriel's legacy is being so forgettable that her death didn't matter, which might be the saddest thing Family Guy has ever done completely by accident. Death loved. On the topic of characters who probably shouldn't work but do, Death showing up as this chill, laid-back dude who just wants to hang out is perfect. Most shows would make Death scary or mysterious, but Family Guy said, what if Death was just some guy who's tired from work and wants to grab a beer? Death's whole thing is that he's bureaucratic and slightly annoyed by his job. He's got quotas to meet, paperwork to file, and people keep arguing with him about their time being up like he's customer service. The guy's just trying to do his job, and everyone treats him like an inconvenience. The comedy comes from how normal Death acts in completely abnormal situations. He'll be taking someone's soul and stop to complain about his boss or mention his weekend plans. He's got the energy of a middle manager who's been at the same job too long and is completely run out of enthusiasm for the mission statement. His appearances are always memorable because the show uses Death sparingly enough that each one feels special. When Death shows up, you know it's going to be either genuinely funny or surprisingly dark. He's the perfect example of Family Guy taking a concept and just making it weird. Fans love Death because he represents what most people think about their jobs, just showing up, doing the thing, and trying not to think too hard about the existential implications. Death is relatable, which is a wild sentence to type but completely accurate. If you enjoyed this video, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so please subscribe, and thanks for watching.